Okay, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the May 15th, 2025 regular meeting of the Planning Board. Seeing we have a quorum, call to order, and we can stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, first order of business is conflict of interest. Does any member have a conflict of interest or the appearance of a conflict of interest with regard to any item on the agenda? And if so, please state so at this time. Richard?
No, I do not.
Yep.
No, I do not.
I do not.
I do not.
I do not.
Okay, here, no conflicts. Next item is to approve or amend the published agenda. Any changes or somebody want to move for approval?
Could we get an update on the budget process on the land use plan? Probably take 2 seconds. Yeah, I'm asking to add that to the
Under-
agenda.
Yeah, well, that can be brought up during administrative comments. Right?
Okay.
Okay.
All right, fine.
So I think it's covered in 7 already, even though Lisa didn't want to speak, but. Motion to approve?
I so move.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
The agenda is approved. We got some minutes from our previous meetings to go over and approve. First of all, from the meeting of March the 20th.
I have only one, and it's just a little confusing. On page 3, at the bottom of the discussion and the vote on the political signs, I think it's a little confusing. We approved the
Yeah.
motion to.
You're talking about the word defeated in there?
Yes.
Right, yeah, same thing. I marked that as an issue. I think it's just the amendment wasn't approved, but the motion carried. So I agree. I think that either that defeated word should just leave or just replace with the word carried. Because the motion was to deny. It's just cleaning up the procedural thing. So the motion to deny carried, but the amendment didn't go through. Does that make, that's what happened.
Yeah.
I think
Right.
I highlight the same thing because it sounds, if you read that last word, you see it sounds like the motion to deny was defeated, but the motion to deny carried. And you say that in your last sentence, I think, here. The motion to recommend denial of the proposed text amendment carried. So either strike that word defeated or just put carried in there, whatever. Whatever is
Yeah.
proper.
Thanks.
Yeah, the motion carried, the motion was not defeated. But I know the thinking about the amendment was denied, so it was turned. I know the thought process sort of, but just it does either strike it or
Yeah, I think if you just strike it,
yeah, you could strike it, or I said if you need to have something there because it's required to put something there, you could use right. Okay. Other than that, I don't have anything either on this thing.
Yeah, me too.
One quick comment, just because you covered it in all the other spots where we had public comments and nobody spoke. You always put none or no one spoke or something. Could we add none or
You like the number
Something.
6?
yeah to number 6, page 2,
None.
just to
Yeah.
clarify that we had the public hearing and nobody spoke.
And what do we do on the other one? Same thing, or we just
Yeah, she usually puts none, I think.
Yeah.
yeah? So just
That's
none.
fine.
Yeah, public comments, none.
Yep.
Yeah, so we don't feel it doesn't appear like we missed somebody. Yeah, that's fine. Okay, so I want to make a motion to approve these minutes with the 2 minor changes, striking the word defeated on page 3 and adding the word none on page 2.
I so move.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Approve with
Aye.
the changes. And moving on to the minutes of April 17th. Anyone have anything or
No, I don't.
a motion to approve as written?
I so move.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Minutes are approved with no changes.
That was a good one.
And the last one was our May 1st, 2025 special meeting that Wes was in attendance on. And we talked about the presentation is attached, that someone can open it, right? That we talked about. The presentation's attached, will be attached to the minute so that, yeah. Oh, I didn't look online. So because on the top where you say it's attached, they can go online and they can click on it and open up the seat. Right.
Say that, yeah.
The SB loop meeting. I guess that's land use plan.
Yeah.
The loop. Yeah, so if you click on that, you can see the Wes McLeod presentation. Any changes or motion to approve?
I just want to say and commend. This was a very nuanced discussion, and sometimes it's difficult in minutes to reflect that. And I think the summary here really does reflect the nuances and some of the areas of discussion that we went into. So I approve this. Just wanted to
I second
share my
that.
thoughts.
I second that because it was very thorough and very detailed. Did a
Yep.
great job.
And yes, good job, and certainly obviously add this and the presentation to your books. So once we get the official kickoff, we'll have a good clean record of what everybody's thinking was. So all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Minutes are approved. Thank you to the staff. Any public comments?
None?
None. Seeing there's no one here. Other than us. Okay, item 6.1. Not surprising, this eventually came up, I guess. Non-conforming lots in MR3, residential, mainland residential 3 zoning district. So Ron 2, why don't you bring everyone up to date of what we're discussing here?
This is going to be important.
Yes. Oh, the other Ron 2.
Hello? Good? Okay. All right. This is for discussion only. You do not have anything before you to vote on. However, at the end of the discussion, after we're hoping for some direction from you as a board to direct staff on how to move forward if you choose to move forward with addressing this issue. So I'm going to go, the paper that Kimberly had handed out just before the meeting waiting for you is what I'm going to call was an issue paper. More informative than what you got in your package, and I understand you guys have not had a chance to read it. So I'm going to go through that, I hope, fairly thoroughly. So bear with me. So back in 2021, the town approved an amendment to the side setbacks for the MR3 zoning district. And that went from, but they also increased the minimum lot size. The lot size went from 5,000 square feet, or excuse me, 7,500 square feet to 10,000 square feet. But the side setback went from 5 feet to 10% of the average lot width. So in the MR3, there was a 5-foot setback, and in 2021, it was changed to 10% of the lot width. And as part of the adoption of the current UDO back in 2023, the minimum required setback was changed again from that 10% of the average lot width to 7.5 feet.
And that's 7.5 feet from the wall or from the eaves?
From the eaves.
Okay.
As the town code is roof overhangs, stairs, etc., have to comply with the setback
Okay.
requirement. It's a little different than some other jurisdictions.
Yeah.
All right, so these most recent changes, in staff opinion, well, have created some non-conforming lots and non-conforming structures in the MR3 district, particularly any home that was built as close as 5 feet. So when they pulled permits, they were able to construct as 5 feet. And if they want to extend or enlarge their home, it's creating some concerns and some issues. The three neighborhoods that I've been able to pinpoint, and I think they were discussed back in 2021 as well, would be Sandpiper Bay and Jaguar's Lair, and then lots within Sea Trail. So in that issue paper that I passed out, I'm going to give you an example of 887 Sandpiper Bay Drive. This actually went to the Zoning Board of Adjustment in February, and it was denied by the Board of Adjustment ultimately. So the owner of this property wanted to construct an open and roofed porch in the back of the house, and on the illustration that you have there in that paper that was handed out today, you'll see that illustrated in red. When their home was constructed in 2004, the property was not part of the town of Sunset Beach, so it was part of the unincorporated area of Brunswick County, and it was a 5-foot setback. Property was annexed in 2007 by the town, and at the time there was a 5-foot setback. The owner desired to construct a roof and porch that would be even and run down, you'll see in this illustration, run down the side of the home. So just imagine their wall of their home and the overhang kind of being same exact location, just extending further. And the way the code is currently set up, they would have to comply with that 7.5-foot setback for that extension. Which would obviously leave about a 2.5-foot overhang or offset. That would in this case would have been a window exposed, etc. The lot size for this particular home or for this particular lot was about 8,276 square feet, which is less than the 10,000 square feet than the code currently requires.
So this is a non-conforming lot and a non-conforming structure.
Yes, sir. And the lot has only 60 foot of frontage along Sandpiper Bay. And a lot of the lots, and I certainly can't say I give you a percentage at this time. I'm trying to figure out the best way to do this, but a lot of the lots, particularly in the vicinity of this particular home on Sandpiper Bay, are 60 feet or even fewer. There were some across the street that was like 57 foot wide. And there is one right where the road starts to curve a little bit because of the arc, if you will, the curve. They're like 100 feet. But majority of the lots, at least in the vicinity of this particular one, are fewer than the 75 foot. Let's just put it that way. I do not have a percentage and a lot breakdown and that kind of thing. There's 60% or 50%. I don't have that breakdown. May can provide that information if we move forward with anything at your next meeting. But at this point, I'm kind of just framing the issue. So, this particular property owner and others in the community, if they want to do something similar, enlarge their home, add a porch, etc., they would have to go through the Board of Adjustment and try to prove a hardship. In this particular case, the Board of Adjustment denied the request because they could construct a porch that was offset.
Right.
It's
not a hardship. It's just
may not meet the
inconvenient.
desires of the owner and so forth. But in this case, they could construct a porch, but it would just have to meet the offset. They have that 7.5 feet. So we've been asked to. This is elevated to council. I think someone had emailed the council, and council has asked us to look into potentially considering changes to the code that would address these non-conforming situations. So on page 2 of the handout I gave you today, or you were handed today, we have the definition of non-conforming building and then the definition of non-conforming lot. And then I also gave you the standards for a non-conforming structure. Should be cut it right out of your code, so that it should be consistent. What's in your code. And then the standards for non-conforming lots. And if you look at, what I want to say, 3.42B3, and it says number 6, non-conforming structures. I'm not sure why it says 6. I'll check that numbering. May not be expanded, extended, or altered in any way that would increase non-conformity, etc. So that's where we come in play there. So at the end of the day, if we choose to move forward with something, The last page there, I've provided a few solutions, tried to narrow down some that I felt like were palatable. There probably are other potential solutions as well. The first one is to revert the minimum setback in the MR3 back to 5 feet. The second one would be to create provisions that would allow an existing non-conforming single-family home to be enlarged if the enlargement does not create new nonconformities or increase the extent of the side setback conformity. So make it clear that if town council ultimately is okay with it, they want to extend down the side of their home, but not get further than 5 feet. In this case, just that example where they were 5 feet away, they couldn't get closer than 5 feet. That's what number 2 is trying to say. We would work on language. I'm not saying this language is perfect, but if it's the direction of the board, we'll work on language to bring it to you next time. Number 2 could be, and then the third option would be similar to number 2, but limit to existing non-conforming single-family homes only in the MR3 district. And we could get as specific as even those that are zoned MR3 with less than 75 foot of width. So it's not if we change it to 5 feet MR3, it's every lot that is zoned MR3 would have a 5 foot setback per 7.5. If we do number 2, then any existing single family detached home, that is, regardless of zoning, if they were and that would apply. And then number 3 is then making it even a little bit more specific, if you will. So I just gave you 3 options. I could probably have thought of 7 or 8 others, but I felt like I was trying to find 3 that were palatable for consideration, and then open up the floor for discussion. Try to go through this as thorough as possible without throwing a lot at you, but make sure you understand. I wanted to frame the issue and then provide you some data and then potential solutions, if you will.
So I guess since been here through the whole saga, this 2-step saga, where I'm at right now, I guess I'm not right now keen on your first possible option.
Yeah, I'm not saying it was a perfect solution, but it is a solution. It is
changing it permanently back to 5, considering that we enlarged the lots, I would say, in my mind, would need to be convinced that there's a good reason for that. But your second bullet point, or your third, or some combination thereof, I'm certainly open to. I don't think this person or any person there should have to notch their addition. So I guess the way I was looking at it, and I don't know how to write this, I'm not sure it should be a additional note under the table. Like if you look on page 338, we do have like an MR3 note in there already. Should we be adding a note there, or adding an additional provision in 342 to non-conformities? Maybe that's the better place to put it, in saying that any non-conforming structure on a non-conforming lot in MR3 that is less than 10,000 square foot, allowing an addition to the principal structure to follow the same side setbacks. So like as long as they're doing an attached addition, or maybe even a modification less than 50%, and they're less than the 10,000 square feet in MR3, they can continue the side setback. Of course, they still would be responsible for the front and back setback, and certainly would not apply to any detached accessory structure or accessory dwelling unit.
Right. It would make it clear that it
So if you
applies
want-
to the enlargement of the home in this case.
Right.
Right.
So I don't know if that's added to the note at the bottom of the table where we specified the 7.5 site as a note 4, or we put this all in 342 as just a separate thing, lots in non-conforming structures on non-conforming lots in MR3 less than 10,000 feet.
Well, could we have do we have a non-conforming structure on a conforming lot?
Can you? Yes, you can have there are standards where a lot would be, and this just kind of stretch this
So
example
you're
a little
saying
bit.
you could have a non-conforming structure because it's at the 5-foot setback, but the lot's over 10,000.
Yes,
Right.
yeah, that may even
That would be
exist in
possible.
Sandpit.
So we just got to say a non-conforming structure in MR3.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would
Well,
limit it to the structure.
I have less sympathy for the person that's got a 10,000 square foot lot. I mean, I live in Sugar Sands. My lot's non-conforming. So, but for someone that has adhered to the most stringent MR3 standards with a 10,000 square foot lot, so they're a conforming lot, I don't see the relief that's being given to then say to them, well, now you can create a non-conforming structure. Does that make sense?
Trying to follow, and I'm going to use Sandpiper Bay as an example. Now, maybe not this particular lot, but
Right.
the
No,
reason why I
I-
use this
I
lot
understand.
was the reason why I use this lot was because it was like something that I've experienced here while working with the town. And I feel like it would be, I had illustrations and things to provide you.
Well, I'm very open
So-
to the idea of offering someone whose lot where the rules changed on them. So they had an 8,000 square foot lot, and we changed the MR3s to 10,000 square feet.
Right.
They had a lot, they weren't part of the town, now they're part of the town.
Right.
So
And plus, you got to realize we changed this twice on them.
yeah,
They
Yes.
went from a 5-foot setback to a 10% of their lot width to now
a 7
no
and a half.
less than 7. So
But there are situations where, and I think
Yeah.
Stuart brought it up, where you may have a 10,000 square foot or greater lot, and when the home was built at 5 feet, and they want to do an expansion.
They want to do a porch.
Right.
Why does their lot size have anything to
Right.
do with that? And
they-
so what I'm thinking about too is that you get into cul-de-sacs where they've got,
Ridges.
every other lot is 8,000 square feet, but you get in a cul-de-sac with odd-shaped lots, and now
Right.
somebody's got a 10,000 square foot lot. Their neighbor was allowed to do a porch extension, but he can't because he's got a pie-shaped lot with more area.
So essentially, we could be able to limit this just to setbacks. Because
Yeah.
I get your point.
That's what it
about-
would be. It would.
Yeah.
That would be my thought. Is
Yeah,
limited
so-
to the setback.
Just
Okay.
side setback. Yeah.
just the side setback only. And I guess where I'm at is it has to be attached to the
Yes, it
principal
does.
structure.
Yeah.
That's
Right.
not conforming.
Most definitely.
You
Yeah,
can't
he
throw
said
up an
shed.
accessory dwelling unit or accessory structure at 5 foot.
Right.
It's not attached. You need to put it at the 7.5.
Right.
So I
Right.
guess how and where to write this, I'm open to the
Let me brainstorm that a little
right.
bit.
But I think
It's-
I guess are we agreed in principle that
I want
but it
I think
has
the-
to be a non-conforming structure too.
yeah,
though.
I
Yeah.
think the principle is
We can't have a conforming. In other words, if they built their house at 7.5 foot just by fluke,
yeah,
I don't want them to be able to put
Yes.
their porch over to 5 foot.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yes, yeah, that's clear, and that's consistent
Yeah.
with my
Right.
thinking as well.
I,
I mean,
don't
the-
want the reverse to be true. We give more leniency to somebody.
yeah,
In other words, if they happen to have a big lot
yeah,
and they put 10 foot,
right.
and now I want to build an outside porch like this guy, well, I could go 5 foot closer to the lot line. No, they can only go up to where their principal structure is.
And that's why I don't agree with the first option that Ron put up there.
Yeah,
Just
we-
changing the
Yeah.
side
No, we don't
setback.
want. I don't think anyone wants to
Yeah.
go back to 5 and bring and right.
Yeah.
And I'm not suggesting you guys. I
Right.
would think that you guys.
No,
would
you had to
consider
throw.
it, but I
You
wanna
had
let
to
know
throw
it
out
is an
there for an option.
Yeah.
I understand that.
Just like no change is an option as
Yeah,
well.
I think the
Yeah, the other option is not change anything.
Yes.
Yeah, the guiding principle here is we want to give relief to people who, in good faith, built a home according to the rules when the rules were this, and then the rules got changed. So now they're in a situation where, I think they do deserve some relief. Now, how do you, the challenge is how do you narrow that relief so it doesn't open the door to,
That's sort of my challenge. So I've gotten direction from the conversation, and we can make
So
a
I think we
formal
all
vote on
agree.
that if you want. But I've got my challenge is once you've given me the direction, is to try to go craft the
So I guess to
language.
give them direction, first of all, do want to, as I said, we want to limit the things attached to the principal structure that's non-conforming,
I think that's fair,
and certainly 5 foot,
right?
but equal to what it was.
Now, is there a
I don't know how
situation?
you write that. That
Did
it's
you want to apply it to MR3 only?
MR3 only.
Okay.
Yeah.
Non-conforming.
Now, there isn't a situation where the 10% rule gets in the way here. I don't think it would.
Well, no, I don't think it would either. And going back, so if you just reverted it back to the 10% rule as an example, because I've kind of
Right.
did this, you may have a lot with 110 foot of frontage.
Right.
Then now you're telling them they have to be,
22 feet.
11 foot.
Yeah.
Well, 11
Okay.
foot on each
Never
side.
mind.
Now, the only thing that came to my mind, what about and I wrote in my notes too, these additions, I said, less than 50%. I mean, somebody decides to throw a big addition on their house, if it's going to be, we kind of have that as our general rule. If you're under a 50% modification, you get these kind of exceptions. But when you go over that,
Not
Is
so
that-
much.
is that to limit it to that too? In other words, we're just looking here, it looks like someone's doing a little porch or patio or something, which clearly, but someone decides to put a 2-story addition on the back of their house.
And
That's
put
a
it
problem.
5 feet off the line.
Yeah, I mean, do we count that? Think that's the same here, even though it might be still attached? And certainly the front and back setbacks can't change.
Look, I can.
You can
propose
think
some
that
language.
through?
I'll think it through, and
Right.
we can further discuss it when you have language in front of you
Right.
at the next
Okay.
meeting.
Now, do we get in trouble here with any of the downzoning issues that?
I don't think so, because
This is sort of upzoning.
it's really allowing
More
something
flex-
that's not allowed now.
Okay,
Right.
that's what I thought.
So the question is, does staff have enough direction now?
I think so. So here, just the notes that I've taken would be to limit to the side setback, apply only to an existing non-conforming structure, apply only to MR3, and make it clear it applies to an extension or enlargement of an existing home, and then potentially think about limiting the addition to less than 50% of the home, and larger has to then comply with the full standards.
And do we have to say it has to be attached?
Yes.
And do we need the exception
I mean, we
line
can
saying does
clarify.
not apply to any accessory structures or accessory dwelling units?
We can. I mean, let me think that over.
Okay.
Now, is there a way to amend the Board of Adjustments guidelines on
No,
this?
That's part of
No.
the
It's
law.
not. They're part of the state statutes,
Okay, never mind.
and
Okay.
they ask good questions. So then one of the questions they asked was, "Can you comply?" And the answer, I mean, obviously, the owner had to say yes, but here, if I
So-
do comply, here are some of the ramifications of me of complying with the
Okay.
regulations.
On bullet number 3, where you
Yes, sir.
basically limited to a lot width,
Mm-hmm.
I just assume not have that.
That's fine.
Okay.
I will use the notes we've talked about today as my guidance versus
Right.
that
I
specific.
just wanted to
Mm.
throw that out there.
So 1 and 3 are out, and work on number 2 with the discussion we've
Right.
talked about today.
Sounds good.
Agree. Yep.
I got that. I think it's clear direction for me. If not, I can always go back and listen to the tape.
Yeah, and I don't know where you think. Well, you can decide where to put it. A note on that table, or a note on the table referring to the non-conforming section, whatever.
Yeah, my thoughts are probably the non-conforming
Conforming
section,
section.
but I'll think about that as well.
Okay, so I guess supposedly ready in the next meeting, or
That's my goal, is to get you something to vote on at your next meeting, so we can get it to council July, August for public hearing, no later than August for the public hearing.
so is this the only one open permit request?
I mean, I've turned down a couple of requests, and I can think of one in Sea Trail where the neighbors built at 5 feet, and they
So this
wanted
person's just going to have to wait. For
infill lot.
this person will
yes.
have to wait for the council to act.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and the decision is, if the rules change, that this person can then apply under the new rules.
Right.
Okay.
So I think that's what you were getting at, Sharon.
Yeah. But at least I have some hope, maybe.
Correct.
Okay, so
Thank you.
staff will work on that, bring that back to us next meeting.
Yes.
Next item for Ron, which is not much for Ron, more for me, I guess. 6.2. I brought up at the last meeting that we should think about our current Article 3.32 minimum parking requirements on page 353 of the UDO. So Ron just said, tossed it back to us. What do we think? So, as I said last time, my thought looking at this is flip it basically from a minimum requirement of parking to basically a maximum requirement of parking. I mean, we could get rid of the whole thing altogether. And first of all, this is only non-residential. I'm not at all looking at the resident. So this is non-residential commercial items, which if you look at the table, if you look at the table on page 355, you got some residential stuff on the top, and then on the third blue bar there, it starts all the non-residential, and there's language before it. So my thought was to, well, I could be convinced to get rid of it, is to basically flip it from a minimum to a maximum, and then make any adjustments in the table that we think is possible, because our thinking now, I think, is to be less vehicle centric than we used to be for countrywide, and then to look at the allowances we give in section D there on page 354. We do give them 20% over the table on D3, right? D3. A site will not be the number of spaces exceed 20% of the minimum. So I'm kind of okay with that. So if we come up with this is well, I don't know. If we
Well,
come
that's a
up,
lot.
this is that's a lot. It could be down to 10%. But I think first of all, conceptually, anyone agree on? Well, we could choose to just leave this alone. But my point is, we haven't seen a lot of, especially in our overlay district, a lot of commercial development. And then years ago, when we worked on this the first time when I was a newbie, it might have been my first year or so, we loosened up the minimum part. We reduced them to encourage more commercial development, especially in our overlay district. And now that was probably 5 years ago. I don't remember the date we looked at it. Not much has happened. So
Now, refresh my memory. The overlay district is what I call 904 up to Old Georgetown Road, and
Sunset Boulevard.
Sunset Boulevard.
right.
And it goes a little further right to that corner. Yeah, around the corner a little bit. Yeah, but essentially,
Yeah.
So
So,
what
the only right now,
right here. I mean, where we're and what we have, well, we've got a couple dental and mental medical offices that probably were built, and we got the store at the end and a Dollar General. That's all that's kind of happened.
that has happened.
Right.
Right.
And in the store might have been before we changed the parking. And that I don't remember. The Coastal Outfitters, whatever it's called. That I don't remember if that actually they had so much room it didn't make a difference. So I think we don't just deleting it completely. I'm a little worried about, because that gives them unlimited headroom to pave as much as they want.
Right.
And I'm not comfortable with that, because I don't think we want as much. We don't want an unlimited amount of asphalt. So we
Right.
want to kind of cap the asphalt if we can within reasonable limits. But if a business wants to put only 3 parking spots in and they think that's good enough for the business, so be it. If they lose business because they ain't got enough parking, that was their choice. That's part of their business plan. Why do we have to set minimums, make them make parking that they don't think they might need? And they end up paving over permeable ground and lose landscaping and lose trees maybe, because we forced them into these minimums. And are we turning away business development because I want to put a little shop here and I think I only need 4 spots, but you're telling me I need 8. I got to make my lot bigger and my building smaller to accommodate your parking. So that's where I'm at, is flip the mins to a max. I don't know if we need a minimum of, like, saying 2 spots, 1 being handicapped or something, a
Well, there's
minimum.
probably some federal regs.
I don't know if we need like a floor, a complete floor, that no matter what, you got to have 2 spots, 1 being a handicap accessible, but basically take everything else away and then give them a maximum with a little allowance, whether allowance is 5%, 10%, maybe less on the island, a little more on the mainland. That's a fine detail, but I'd like to hear everybody now has had I'm sure you all sat in your homes and thought about this over the last month. So hear what your thoughts
Well,
are.
God help me, I actually did.
Oh, stop, Richard.
But I think this is, one of the things we're going to be struggling with over the next year or two is how to guide commercial development. I think we're kind of played out on the residential side, but I think this is kind of a key issue in terms of when we look at the goals, in that we want commercial infrastructure to be more walkable, less traffic based. So this, in my mind, is kind of the tactical end of that strategic idea. So I kind of support it in that, we don't, in my view, anything that we can do to promote commercial development in the MUD district, okay, which would have limited parking because we're going to create multiple commercial interactions in a limited space. You park once, you have 4 commercial interactions, you don't have to get back in your car. So that has an impact on how much parking you need. And, in that hope, we have less commercial along the thoroughfares. We preserve the kind of small office unit profile. So I think by doing the parking, flipping the script on that kind of achieves that goal. So, in terms of the actual numbers of the language, I'm not sure how you codify that, but I think it's the right idea.
New guy.
No,
Taylor?
no
Yeah.
comment right now.
Okay.
Um,
Stuart?
so I was kind of against this initially, but I started doing a bunch of research and found out that, lots of different towns across the country are doing this.
Mhm.
And read a paper that I found online from the American Planning Association, and it was pretty good. And so I think for me, I'm with you on the commercial side, and I don't want to take out the minimums for residential. And just from my perspective, just so y'all know, having worked with residential developers over the years, they are a minimum crowd.
Right.
So they're
They
not
want to build more houses.
Yeah. So if we take away parking minimums for them, they'll provide one space for 3 units and say, tough.
Right.
So
Because they're
in the-
gone by the time the residents
That's
fill up.
right.
Right.
So the difference there is in a residential developer, you're working with a guy who's producing a product for sale to somebody else. When we're working with commercial people, generally you're working for the end user.
Right.
And they're wanting to do the best for themselves. So, but I think I'm for it. And I'm kind of like you. I think we just turn the mins into maxes, and maybe we need to tweak it a little bit here and there. The one thing I would say though, and I got stuck on the handicap thing because handicap parking rules require, so like if you have 1 to 25 spaces, you're required 1 handicap. If you have, it goes in graduated things, and then after a certain number, it's a percentage.
Right.
Which is the way it used to be. It always used to be a percentage.
That's what I was saying. Do we still need a minimum that's really minimum? Like you must have 2 spaces and at least 1
From
Yeah.
my understanding,
is handicap accessible.
that's going to be required, I think, through the permitting process
Right.
anyway. And then,
They'll be required 1 handicap space.
Right.
and-
So we need sort of a de minimis minimum
Right.
that's a floor no matter what.
I think through the permitting process, even through building inspections and so forth, it's going to be required to show a handicap space.
Right.
And as far as how many, as I understand the rules, and Stuart, just want to kind of touch on again, I think in agreement with what you're saying.
Right.
If a developer chooses to have 100 spaces and it's still within the maximum, I mean, that's going to determine how many handicap spaces they
Right.
have. The town doesn't need to say X amount of handicap spaces.
Right.
Right.
I mean,
They're going to be
right
required
now,
to be federal guidelines.
right now, if we require 100 spaces and now we take away the minimum and he decides, well, I only want to put in 50, well, that determines how many handicap spaces he
Right.
puts in.
Right, and 50 spaces is less infrastructure to construct. It's less stormwater to construct.
Right.
It's, should help the environment. Opportunities for more trees or more green space. I'm not saying it will result in that, but it provides opportunities, particularly on your
And-
larger tracks.
and as-
Larger tracks.
Rich was saying, sidewalks and
Yeah.
wider sidewalks, and
Right.
so
And
yeah, I
just
mean, and just laying a lot of asphalt down, and as we talk, in most businesses, they almost never utilize their parking lot. Very seldom. I mean, most businesses have kind of a peak time. A restaurant, okay,
Mhm.
their parking lot's full or close to full at 7 p.m. or whatever.
Right.
But during the rest of the day and after that, it's not. In the grocery store, I mean, the food line, which is fairly busy, that thing's never more than 50% full.
Wow. Saturday.
Well, Saturday. And I guess the other thing, as a caveat to this, we do have to realize we're a tourist town, and tourists come here with vehicles because it's the only way to get here.
Right.
So I want to make sure we don't make this the maximum too tight, knowing that our visitors, even though I'm sure they would like, as you say, be able to park the car and maybe walk to a couple different places and then come back to the car and leave, would be fine with them, that they can't go anywhere because there's no place. So we can't go too crazy too low on the maximums. But
If we need to be careful, at least the way the rules are currently written, the statutes are currently written, we're not doing anything to generate a downzoning. So if we were to lower whatever we do, we want to make sure they can at least do the same amount of maximums they could do now, I guess is what I'm getting at.
oh, yeah, because
So we can't just change the minimums to maximums.
we allow them
To additional
20% over
right.
what's in here now.
So if we were to change the just for discussion purposes, if that's the direction the board wants to go, is to eliminate minimums and just regulate maximums, we'd have to change the equation to include that 20% somehow.
yeah, so
That's what I'm
either add it to the strike the line, just add it to the table,
yeah somehow. I just have to
or
make sure
leave
the
the
math
table
will
and
come
then
out
leave
right.
the line.
I just have to make sure the math comes out right.
Yeah, right.
But just that's for this, just throwing that out there. Whatever we do, we got to be mindful of that down zoning definition. As long as it's,
So I think,
we think it's going to change at some point, and to allow local governments to down zone.
but though I would think,
But right now
I
it's
would
not
think
changed.
no non-residential developer would think this is a down zoning,
No,
taking away the
right, and we wouldn't be
they
touching
won't view it
residential.
as, right, but we
Right.
have to be careful that we
Yes.
comply to the law, of course.
Correct. Yeah, but we would not.
And we
my
won't finish
understanding-
this maybe until that changes anyway. So,
Maybe.
Joey,
Kind of agree. A little less is more in this situation. I think giving a opportunity or put the onus on the entrepreneur to decide if that's the right way to go. So I think it's a great idea.
And 2 more points on it.
yes,
One was you were done, right, Jerry?
Yes.
Okay.
Third, please.
Right. If we're going to change, a minimum parking requirement, I went through the code and looked at our shading requirements. And if we're going to have less parking spaces, can we get something in return, which would be maybe more trees?
Again, we'll have to look at the down zoning piece of it, because that may qualify. I'm not saying it does, but if they have to do more buffering or more landscaping, that may, as currently written, be interpreted as a down zoning. Not saying we can't, but we just need to look at it.
if not, we should leave the space for it.
Right.
If we take some lines
It's a good
out,
idea.
leave the paragraph open for future
Right.
use.
I understand what you're saying. If we're gonna give them something, can we get something
Yeah,
in
I mean, we'd
return?
like to get more
Right.
trees and more
But-
landscaping
Well, I mean,
and
they have-
bigger sidewalk, something
Yeah.
more useful to the
we
community
just-
and beautifies the community other than asphalt with yellow stripes on it.
Or a bioretention place in the middle of a parking lot, or something, that's more attractive. It's handling some storm water. It's
Right.
breaking up the monotony of a parking lot. It's,
Yeah, no, we can look at things like that. We just have to be mindful of, unless that definition changes, how the state defines down zoning.
the only other thing was overflow or temporary parking. If
Do those pavers.
if they're a specific use that they have a a big peak at one point in time, can they reach an agreement with somebody else for overflow or temporary parking or something like that would take that onus off of them to have this, an extra 50 spots for this one event per week or something like that. I'm just
Either
trying to
shared,
think.
we talked about though around for the mud district that all their parking should be shared parking, right?
Yes, and that's something that at a minimum, if we don't do anything else, I want to make sure that's clarified in this order, because to me it's not clear.
And my one caveat to not messing with residential would be the mud district, and I'd just say in the mud district, we just don't have any parking minimums and let them, work it out.
Yep.
Because it's the same developer for the whole thing, so he's not going to hurt himself, that kind of thing. And that kind of ties into this paper that I read. They had kind of a conclusion statement, and they said if there's a lesson for how smaller communities can avoid or lessen such fears of parking minimums reform, it's by providing flexibility in the new policy. That is, we don't necessarily apply the reduced parking standards to all types of properties or all parts of town. Be targeted in the approach. So again, I think we could go in and look at the mud district having no minimums and
Right.
See how that works.
And
See how
apply the
some of
new
this
maxes
stuff
to
works.
MB1 and MB2, and we might have slightly differences for BB1, right?
Yeah, I mean, and to that point, Stuart, some towns required, even in the downtown business districts, to have minimum parking standards, and that was a way. That's an idea. The smaller towns say, okay, well, we're not going to regulate parking in our central business district, which I know we don't necessarily have a central business district.
right.
Mud is close to that.
Yeah.
But you mentioned
It'd
there's
be nice to actually attach our overlay district to the mud district. By the way, the buildings and sidewalks and
right.
paths get built would be in the end the nicest thing is that they're sort of attached, even though there's essentially going to be a road in between them, but
Right.
would be the way to do. You'd park there and walk across the street and visit a few places, or bike through.
Right. Yeah, there's a guy named Charles Marone. He's founding president of Strong Towns, and you guys, he's written a book called The Confessions of a Recovering Engineer. I have that book. I have not
I haven't
read it.
reached that point yet.
I was given that book when my director
I didn't
in
recover
Wilmington.
either.
I would have covered
But his mindset is he has something called like on Black Thursday or Black Fridays. He has people go around and take pictures of the busy retail centers where people claim there's no parking, and then all the vast amount of parking that's available. So you go to your big malls or whatever, and only 30% of the malls, even on a Black Friday, were
Right.
being covered.
Yeah,
Were really being.
I mean, I lived in a highly populated area with a few big, huge malls around them. And even like on Black Friday, you could still get a spot. Now you're walking further, but you needed it actually. But you could still, we went to Woodfield Mall, which was huge. I mean, there was still parking available even on Black Friday. But there was a sea of cars, of course. But
But the purchasing trends have changed so much.
Right.
Yeah.
People
But again,
are
we
more
always say-
online, and even you have like the door dashes and things for restaurants and so forth. So maybe less so in a tourist community.
yeah, we
Yeah.
have to keep that aware because people have to drive here. So
Well, I
Unless
mean,
we're-
there's
unless we're
also
putting a train in, a high-speed train in or something.
yeah, there's also a social
California.
element to this. As someone that spent 30 years in a small town that dealt with these issues, as you increase walkability, as you encourage ride sharing, you'll find that the parking requirements shrink.
Mhm.
And
100% agree with you.
Okay,
Moving on.
so
Oh, can I make
yes.
one last thing?
what do you got there? Big drawing there.
So I was trying to get up a big map, and I was going to do a sketch of the parking lot up there where the Family Dollar, Sarah's Kitchen, Hardee's is, because I was thinking about that's kind of my perfect example of over parking,
yes,
because there's that one area in the middle, and I'll kind of shoot this around, but there's that one area in there that nobody ever parks in. That's all seagull parking.
Yeah.
And so what I was thinking is you take that area that's in the Hardee's, and if you cut that same area out of this spot, this developer could almost do another out parcel
Or two.
Yeah.
or two and have their own parking, like the Hardee's has their own parking. You could have another out parcel with their own parking, and then you've got all of this shared parking for that development. So in a way, we're creating more developable areas.
Yes.
But if we agreed to something like that, I would say, we'd want something in return, which would be, more trees and
Sidewalks,
some
crosswalks.
stormwater, crosswalks,
Yeah.
that kind of thing. And maybe eliminate, he's got an extra entrance in there, maybe eliminate that. But again, I don't know
Yeah,
if it's something we
I don't
can-
know the history of that parcel with all those.
That's been there
Was
for
some of that
years.
laid out as outlots and stuff originally?
Well, I can share anecdotally, the Family Dollar store has closed and is going to consolidate. And they were offering sales where everything in that store was 75% off. Okay. That store was packed. All right. That parking lot was 1/3 full.
Right.
It used to be a grocery store.
Yeah, it was the original food
food
line.
line.
When I first came here, it was the food line until they built the new one across the road.
Right.
Okay. Well, I guess
I guess in principle, we're in
in
agreement.
principle we're in agreement. It's just now how to get there. So we'll look for. Obviously, we're not going to get any text for next month, but at least a directional plan on what we all need to do,
Because I think this can be
or
integrated into the land use plan, kind of as a
Yeah.
guiding principle.
sort of, But so I don't know, Ron, Lisa, what do you think of how we proceed? I think we're agreeing concept of where we want to go.
How do you get there?
Now, what's the right step-by-step path to get there? Just give you guys enough time to write text and review, or
Basically, yes.
okay,
Yep. We can report back something next month, kind of where we're staying. I'm going to let you know I'm going to be out of commission for about 10 days, beginning to end of like May 31st through June 9th.
me too.
And so I'm going to not be able to work on a lot during that time frame. Nothing, to be honest with you, during that time frame. I will definitely focus on the MR3
Yeah,
discussion
let's
we
get
had.
that. Well, let's pencil this in maybe for the July meeting.
But I can definitely, provide you an update on kind of what our thinking is on this,
Great.
but nothing to have in front of you to vote on at your next meeting on this.
Sounds good.
And I won't be at the next meeting.
And I was going to mention that you may want to consider, since Stuart's not going to be here and Ron's going to be away for an extended period of time, and it sounds like you are as well, that you may want to look at canceling your June meeting and moving everything to your July.
Yeah, I'd rather leave it there for now.
Yeah.
I'll be back for the June meeting. It's just, as Ron's saying, the space in between, the preparation period. So if we only, well, we can see if we have nothing on there, but if we do get the MR3 text done, I'm okay coming in and
We're
Yeah.
looking at June 19th right now.
yeah,
And you'll have Stuart won't be here for that June meeting.
Everybody
as it's
else
set
would
right
be?
now.
Yes.
so
And I will not be here for the August meeting.
yeah.
So
We can. I'd leave it on the calendar for now and see if nothing else, get the one item done, because we are sort of holding up. Well, I can't say we're holding up.
We're not holding
per se,
anything up, but it
But
could help resolve an issue.
Yeah.
resolve that issue, get it to the council, et cetera. So if we can maybe just get that one done, end up being a short meeting, and then move everything else to July and August or September or whatever. So
Yeah, I'm not aware of anything else for June this time. So.
okay.
all right.
Very good. We'll move forward on that, targeting this item for the July meeting. Any administrative comments, administration?
Lisa, can we get an update on the land use plan budgeting?
The land use budgeting as consistent as it was last month. It is still in the budget. Wes and I did talk about as we get into the process, if you would like to expand the scope of work to include urban design, bike and ped path planning, we could go back to the town council and ask for additional funding to bring those type of consultants to the table. But I wouldn't do that at this juncture. I would wait until you get into the process with Wes and review the plans that we do have in place already before moving forward and going to council and asking for additional money. Rough estimate to bring some more consultants on board would increase your budget by about 50,000 additional funds.
Okay.
So that would put us a little over 100,000 for that planning process.
So in theory, next budget cycle, maybe we could hit them up for another.
We can always go for a budget amendment, anytime after July when they adopt the new budget.
Okay, and the current budget does include the survey that we discussed.
No, the current budget includes the funds that for the West to do the land use plan update.
Okay, but we
with the
discussed
survey.
Including surveying the
And-
public.
But there is public
survey.
input,
Yeah.
meetings, and processes that are included in that scope of work that Wes outlined already.
Okay, I'm confused. In the 2017 land use plan, there was a public survey that we got some very interesting data off of. Is that public survey, calling people up on the phone who live here or taxpayers and asking them questions, do you want a restaurant, whatever, is that included in this budget at this time?
Public,
Printed
Yeah.
out yet. And it
the
was one of
public
his bullet
input
points
options
that
were.
with that included surveying the public.
Mhm. It could
Yeah.
be one
I
of the
thought it
options.
was in there, but I don't have the paper in front of me
Okay.
to say.
And it would be up to
Can
this
we- can
board
we
as
get-
to decide what options you use for the public input portion. Like I said, it could be a survey. It could be several community meetings. It could be
Both?
community meetings set up at off-site, at the park, at the beach, at Food
Right.
Lion. It'll be up to you to drive the bus as to how you want to receive the public input.
So basically, we've been granted $50,000 to do this, but we don't have any clear instructions on what exactly it is, how we would spend that money.
I think it's 67. Do you remember? I don't,
67.
it's 67.
How much?
67,000 is what's
Okay.
budgeted right now.
Do we have any information on how much that cost in 2017? Just the public survey, just the phone polling. Do we have any insight onto that?
The actual land use planning process started about 13
Right,
and was completed in 15, and then it took CAMA 2 years to approve it.
right. But
So, I
the-
don't recall the 2013 figures.
So we don't. I mean, somebody had to hire. I mean, the company that did
Did we
the
have a
polling.
consultant that did that one?
hmm
So
That did kind of the whole thing, right?
Yeah.
The way I was told. I wasn't
Mm-hmm.
here then.
okay, so it wasn't a specific line item. It was just one of the functions of the consultant team that was okay.
Mhm.
All right.
Okay, any other administrations good?
I would
Administration's good.
just like to share my concern. Learned yesterday of the resignation of Pete Larkin,
Oh.
and
I didn't know that.
yes, Pete resigned from the town council for personal and health reasons. Ron and Jerry and I worked closely with Pete for 2 years to rewrite the UDO, and he made an invaluable contribution with the current North Carolina laws limiting what incorporated towns can do. We are very fortunate that we had the foresight and direction that Pete afforded us, and I just want to wish him well in whatever is next for him.
Yeah,
Here,
I
here.
agree.
All right.
Okay. Open public comments? None seen? Anyone move for adjournment?
I so move.
Any second?
What are you looking at me for?
You're my adjournment. Move.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. Thanks, everybody.